introduce yourself? Let us know what you got going on, what you're working on.
Yeah, my name is Arthur Mongelli. I live in the Hudson Valley of New York State. I started writing in late 2015. First became published April of this year with Harvest of Ruin, the first part of my trilogy. The second part came out mid-September, and actually earlier today I wrapped up the second full revision of the final part. So that should be out, I'm hoping January or February.
Okay, nice. Yeah, being productive.
Trying, yeah. I also have a story in the Reanimated Writers Undead Worlds book that ties into the Harvest of Ruin world, and I believe it came out yesterday. Mad Like Me is an anthology about madness. All the proceeds go to veterans with PTSD, so the theme of the book is insanity.
Oh, cool. Where could people go to support that?
That one is available, I believe, only on Amazon.
Okay, and they would search for
Mad Like Me.
Mad Like Me on Amazon. Okay, cool. So that's what you got in the works?
I basically I was in a rush to clear up the final, the second revision of the final book, to clear my path for November because I plan on participating in the NaNoWriMo this year. Other than that, I've got, I think, 4 starts on novels between 15,000 and 20,000 words. None of them zombie related, but a couple post-apoc ones.
I'm interested in hearing your process of going from having that idea tickle your brain a little bit to sitting down and typing out pages. How do you formulate your idea?
For me, it's kind of I have to immerse myself in kind of the feel of the world that I'm creating. The idea for the Harvest of Ruin story was birthed probably about 10 years ago. I was living with a roommate, and he and I were really into the whole zombie post-apoc thing. And we would watch these movies, and we'd shoot the shit afterward, and bounce ideas off each other. Well, what would we do, in that situation? And it was out of those conversations that my imagination got pumping, and probably 5 years later, I sat down and started to write the story, but I had never written long fiction before. So I had a lot of hiccups with that. Finally, just stay-at-home father now. I needed something to do while a kid was taking a nap, so I sat in front of the computer and I decided fuck it, I'm just gonna write and write and write, and I'll worry about edits and revisions later. And with the first winter I wrote 2 books, and then the second winter was the 3rd book.
Nice. Okay, so that first winter you knocked out 2 books in one go.
Yeah.
Yeah. When the idea's hot and it just kind of pours out of you, that's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
What would you say you do? Like, if you, I know sometimes I'll have an idea and I can't reconcile the idea to fit in the story. So I'm at this roadblock. Like, how do I continue? What do you find works for you as far as, coming up past those roadblocks or coming up with that idea you need to start moving forward again? What works for you in that way?
I think what worked for me in my story was when I would get those ideas, I would just write them out entirely on their own. And it's kind of the way I did all the intertwining storylines in the book. Was I wrote each of them separately, and then I figured out how they were going to tie into each other. And so basically, by the time I was done with the book, I had 3 or 4 separate entire stories, and then I cut the chapters together based on how I thought that those would fit together and meet eventually.
Yeah, that's a kind of cool way, kind of like a puzzle piece, kind of see where everything fits together, all the stories. Cool. Okay. And now, usually what I find is, once you've kind of formulated your idea and you're able to sit down and just start doing the writing, that's where the thoughts of, well, who's going to read this? Like, who even cares that I'm doing this? And so it becomes about audience building. So, like, for me, I had my idea for my comic book that I'm writing, which was, an artificially intelligent robot wakes up 5 years after the zombie apocalypse, just like a forgotten project that just boots up unexpectedly. So it's kind of a take on, we've seen it 28 days later. The Walking Dead, just they wake up in a hospital and have no idea what's going on. It's going to be kind of like that, a take on that sort of feel, where it's an artificial robot waking up and he's got to kind of make sense of this world he's waking up in. But I get to explore cool things like the fact that he's not food to zombies. He doesn't see he doesn't see people at first. All he knows are zombies for a while. He'll eventually meet different people who will kind of essentially have different philosophical viewpoints on how to exist within the zombie apocalypse. That he'll kind of take on to his own personality and start to build his characteristics and stuff like that. So knowing I was going to have this, tech-based zombie novel, I decided to create a zombie Twitter and just foster a community of people that look forward to me posting things about zombies. And I was wondering what kind of audience building and community maintenance experience you have and advice you might have in that category.
Well, to be honest, not too much. My tech savvy kind of ended around the year 2000. I mean, my job for a while required me to have a smartphone, and as soon as it didn't anymore, I went back to a flip phone. I'm definitely backward in that. It was upon publication of my first book that I created a Twitter account and got heavily involved in Facebook. And it's kind of been trial and error. I mean, I've been bludgeoning around trying to see what works and where it works. And to be honest, nothing seems to work. As far as ads, promotions, marketing, those kind of things, I haven't found anything that's affected one way or the other. The sales.
Yeah. I've definitely seen that same sort of trend. Especially for people who are like me, who are just starting out and have no body of work to really show for it. Ads through Facebook, I kind of played around with that a little bit. Didn't spend too much money. I just was kind of like putting feelers out. I had certain ads for my newsletter to try to get eyes on there. But it seems like what works better is kind of, buckshot. Just throw a bunch of things out there. Like what I'm getting ready to do, because I just finished releasing all 10 pages of my Ashcan in my newsletter. So now I'm planning on moving to like Webtoons or Tapastic or Tapas to, again, like I said, just put it out in as many spots as possible. Because if you can get to those places, rather than trying to pay money for ads to bring people to you, it seems like a much better way is to find the places where people already congregate for that thing. And so places like Webtoons and Tapastic, and there's tons that are out there. Those are just some of the ones that have been around for a while. It's free. I think they do have pay versions. But basically it's free, and there are millions of people already on there liking, searching for, and commenting and engaging with creators who are creating Webtoons. So it seems like that's kind of the best bet. Find where the audience are already at while you're kind of building yourself as a creator. And then once you have enough stuff to speak for yourself, enough books and work, at least in my research, it seems like once you have that, that's maybe where you can start seeing a benefit from like paid ads from Facebook. Even people who have tons of that stuff and they have lots of experience, I hear them say over and over again, I'm never going to do Facebook. It's because the way Facebook's algorithms are and how they put what's in front of who, it doesn't really benefit, the creator community.
I found the same with Twitter, going out there and trying to get followers and, people following you and stuff. It just seems like everyone's just trying to sell their own brand.
Yeah, that's I saw that same thing, and I started following Russell Nolte. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's mostly a comic book creator, although I think he is planning on moving to novels. But he has a podcast called The Business of Art, which is something that really, really was needed. I'm not an artist, I'm just a writer, but even me, myself, but mostly the artists in the comic book community are terrible at promoting themselves and understanding marketing. I'm the same way. It just feels gross to kind of like self-promote.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you see all these people doing it, and that's all they're doing. And so it led me to the understanding of, like, I want to be providing value. So as much value as possible. So, like, for instance, my Twitter, I don't sell anything. I don't have anything to sell at the moment. You know, I will eventually have my comic book out once I can get it on Kickstarter. Of course, that's going to be once I have enough eyes to run a Kickstarter on my project.
You'll have to let
But, you
that
know,
comes out because I'm a big time comic book fan.
okay, yeah, definitely. Oh, it's going to be, I'm going to, you know, from all the studying I've done, I've got probably more things planned than I could possibly do. Oh wait, go ahead and pan back. I kind of missed. You were showing me all your
Yeah.
comic book collection.
This is my office,
Oh man.
my man cave, and I guess
Oh
it
my
could be a
goodness.
comic book store if I was willing to part with any of them.
It could definitely be a comic book store. That's incredible. Um, well, that brings me to a question that I just formed. Why have you chosen to write novels and not comic books?
um, a friend of mine, growing up, he was really into being a comic book artist, and he was amazingly talented, and he gave it his best, and he just couldn't crack into it. And then, I did write a comic book story at one point based in the Marvel universe, and in the couple hours of research I did into how I would go about getting that published, I quickly got shot down and told that the only way to get your story to them is to post it on the forums, and they own anything that you put on the forums. So you're pretty much shit out of luck in getting them to
Yeah.
recognize you in that. So after that, I was like, you know what? Let me just see if I can get published.
That was kind of my idea too. Like when I saw just how much nonsense there was in the comic book publishing industry, I was like, all right, well, self-publishing is always an option, so that's just what I'll research. Um, there was a time where I was considering submitting it to Image, but as I was gearing up researching on how to do that the best way, a lot of advice I got was don't. They're not going to pick you up. You have no experience. Like you think you're writing the next greatest comic book, but you're not. A lot of probably good advice told in a really terrible, terrible way because it really turned me off. I decided, well, okay, I won't do it then. But at the same time, who knows? If I had gotten my comic there and they saw it and they liked it, who knows what would have happened. But I think I like the route I'm going now where, because I'm actually also blooming out to a bunch of different stories as well. Mine are all kind of within the same universe, so they're all kind of zombie related. I'd be interested in hearing how you kind of developed a love for the zombie genre. You know, what got you interested in it?
Um, I grew up in the early mid '80s, and my parents were really into slasher flicks. So I mean, I've been watching really violent horror movies since as far back as I can remember. And two of the ones that really traumatized me as a child were Lucio Fulci's Zombie and Romero's Dawn of the Dead. And I love those, Dawn of the Dead especially because the feel. We had a shopping mall by us that it was the spitting image of the mall from Dawn of the Dead. So it was like close to home, and just the whole world really caught me. And I saw the remake of Night of the Living Dead because I wasn't into black and white movies until later on. Then there was that, and then Day of the Dead. All of them really got me into the post-apoc thing, and obviously, at the same time, the '80s was a huge time for post-apocalyptic movies. I mean,
Yeah.
the end of the Cold War, we were all living under the threat of nuclear Armageddon. So that was kind of
Yeah.
like,
What if it happens?
yeah, that was a way of life, back then. It was always looming over our heads. So I think that's kind of, put me in the mindset of, the apocalypse and whatnot. Later on, I think it was 28 Days Later when that came out. Obviously, that's an infected, but there's the argument.
Oh, there are arguments about that for
Yeah.
sure. I've been in some zombie forums, so I've
Yeah.
seen that conversation go down.
Yeah, so there's that, and then obviously the remake of the Dawn of the Dead, the reboot, that has fast zombies in it. So that was like reignited my passion for the genre. And then The Walking Dead, I got turned on to the comic a few years after it came out. I think it was 2007 when I started collecting the comic. And then that fueled the passion again. So Yeah, I guess I've had 3 stages of love for the zombie genre.
Yeah, and you kind of hit on the grandfather, the father, and the child. You know, it's Romero was the one who really got the ball rolling, and then you got 28 Days Later. You know, whether you believe those are zombies or not, they basically created the fast, running zombie.
Absolutely.
And then The Walking Dead, of course, just the present cultural phenomenon happening right now. What's funny is, like, for me, it was almost complete opposite. Like, I never really got into zombies at all when I was a kid growing up. For me, there was a night where I was just bored. I decided to walk down to the movie theater by myself, just go see a movie by myself. And they were having a preview screening, which, if you're familiar with those, like, before the movie comes out, you get to see it. You just got to tell them a bunch of stuff, what you thought about it, so they can make last-minute changes and stuff like that. And it was for Shaun of the Dead. And they were giving out beanies with aim for the head targets on the beanie. And besides, getting free stuff and liking that, I came away from the movie thinking, like, this is probably how people would actually react in a zombie apocalypse. Like, they wouldn't notice it first. They'd scramble, they wouldn't be successful, they'd jump over fences and the fence would collapse, stuff like that. And from there, it just kind of grew and grew, and I started like, oh, here's a zombie movie, here's a zombie, so it became like Resident Evil, and of course I went back and watched all the Romeros. Again, not exactly zombies, but they kind of awoken my love for the Evil Dead movies. And with these TV shows that are coming out now, I'd love to hear what you think about, like, maybe which one's your favorite, if there's one you just absolutely don't like. But, now you have, besides Walking Dead, you have Z Nation and iZombie. A lot of zombie shows, but very different in the topics they choose and the tone of the show. So if you'd like, I'd like to hear kind of what your thoughts are on those.
Yeah, absolutely. The one I watched the least, I think, is iZombie. My wife and I sat down and watched that because that's more of a CW teen feel to it. She doesn't really like the whole apocalyptic thing, so I figured we could lighten it up a little. I might be able to get her to watch it. So the end of the first season, they killed her love interest in it, and my wife wanted nothing to do with it after that. So that was the end of the show for us. iZombie, I kind of have a love-hate thing with it. I enjoy it, but sometimes it's just a little too over the top for me.
I agree. Yeah, definitely. Well, iZombie was one of those where, as good of a show, like, I do like it. It took a while, for sure. Like, I put off watching it, and then even as I was watching it, I was kind of like, well, I got nothing else to watch, and I love zombies, so I might as well go through it. So it took a while before I really got into the show. But you can tell it's definitely something written to make money. Like, it's pop culture, I don't know how you would call it, like popcorn zombie.
Yeah.
It's not, there's not a lot of substance, but the characters, especially because it's so different than a normal zombie story, it's just very unique storytelling going on in that one. Same thing with Z Nation as well. I mean, I like Z Nation, which I can't wait for the next season. I would say, and this may be zombie blasphemy, but I like Z Nation more than Walking Dead. It definitely wouldn't have been that way if we were talking about 4 or 5 years ago. When you're a fan of zombie genres, movies and shows and books, you start to have the same questions. Like, doesn't gasoline expire? Like,
oh yeah, that's a huge one.
Exactly. You start to see these things where people cast away realism for story, and it doesn't really affect it that much, and that's we all enjoy it still. But that's one of the things that I'm trying to focus on are, like, what are those things that are ignored and just kind of swept under the rug so that they can tell a good story, and how can I create a good story with those kind of real life situations. One of the questions, because we're kind of reaching the end of our interview here, that I like to pose, it's kind of anybody who's a fan of zombies has had this conversation with their friends. In a real life zombie apocalypse, how do you think you would fare? How ready are you for an actual zombie apocalypse?
Well, it's kind of funny that this is a question because it was one of the things in writing the book. I started getting really paranoid. I started creating my own bug out bag. Like collecting different things that, not necessarily for a zombie apocalypse, but it's good to have some things on hand regardless of the scenario. If it's a hurricane, a tornado,
Right.
blizzard, the Hurricane Sandy, we were without power for I think 10 days. So
Wow.
there's a number of things that I started collecting just to have.
Hmm.
I think I'm fairly prepared. I think I would do pretty well. I mean, we have enough food in the house that we wouldn't have to go out for probably 2 or 3 months, which I think is the key point in any zombie apocalypse, is not leaving, barricading where you're at, and staying put for long enough until things start to die down.
Hmm.
So I think I do fairly well. That being said, I think a lot of it relies on luck. If we're out shopping when the shit hits
Yeah.
the fan, we're in a lot different scenario than if we're sitting
Yeah.
at home in the evening watching TV. If
Right. Or separated. If you're at home and your wife's not, and your kids are at school and everyone's all spread out, that's a different situation.
Absolutely. So you're relying on that luck that you're all together in your safe spot. Which, what are the odds of that?
Are you familiar with Elsie Champlin?
Yes, I know him through the Facebook group.
Yeah, she's in the Reanimators Writers group.
Yes.
I interviewed her yesterday, and I posed that question to her, and was very interested to learn that she lives in the mountains, so she's not around a lot of people. She's proficient in firearms. She goes hunting and stuff like that. She is versed in Krav Maga.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so she is no
So-
problem. I already claimed her, my team. She's on my team. I told her in the zombie apocalypse. I mean, I'm in Portland, so it'll be quite a trek to go claim her for my team when the shit hits the fan, like you said. But yeah, it's me. I am not that prepared, but I think I have pretty good situational awareness. I've shot guns here and there and seem to have kind of a fairly natural ability for shooting. I'm not a marksman by any means. But, again, then there's the whole thing with bullets. In a zombie apocalypse, you can't prepare for all the variables. That's essentially what I'm kind of expecting if it, for any reason, a zombie apocalypse happens. It's whatever planning I've done, let's hope it was enough.
Yeah, and I'm 60 minutes north of New York City, so I'm in a kind of a precarious situation there.
Ooh. You might get a big old horde coming from the city traveling north.
10 people just an hour away.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is the time where I give you the floor to kind of talk about anything you want to talk about. If you've got social media sites you want people to be able to find you on, any projects you're currently working on and how they can find you progressing there, or maybe even another author that you want to give a shout out to.
Yeah. If you want to find me, I'm on Twitter at Arthur_M_author. Facebook, you can find me, Author Mongelli. Amazon, same thing. Goodreads as well. That's it. I hope you can pick up a copy of Harvest of Ruin. It goes on sale fairly regularly, and it centers around a normal group of people, not Navy SEALs or cops or anyone else. It's just people like you and I.
I can only imagine the misadventures that they're going to get into if they're like me and you. All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
All right. Thank you very much, Austin.